This Part 7 video offers proofs that Jesus Christ was crucified and died on the cross. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. The Quran appears to deny the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The following quotes are from the translation by M.H. Shakir. Though there are claims that the translation was plagiarized from another translation, it is still a good translation and easy to read in English. Sura 3 verse 55. And when Allah said, O Isa, Jesus' Arabic name, I am going to terminate the period of your stay on earth and cause you to ascend unto me and purify you of those who disbelieve and make those who follow you above those who disbelieve to the day of resurrection. Then to me shall be your return, so I will decide between you concerning that in which you differed. Translation of this verse by Abdullah Yusuf Ali reads this way: Behold, Allah said, O Jesus, I will take thee and raise thee to myself and clear thee of the falsehoods of those who blaspheme. I will make those who follow thee superior to those who reject faith to the day of resurrection. Then shall ye all return unto me, and I will judge between you of the matters wherein ye dispute. The Muslims interpret this verse to mean that Jesus did not die but ascended to Allah. This interpretation is made when this verse is read in conjunction with other verses. Now, Surah 19:33, and peace on me on the day I was born, and on the day I die, and on the day I am raised to life. The sequence of events mentioned in the life of Jesus in this verse is his birth, then death, and then his resurrection, exactly as the sequence in the Bible. Muslims claim that the sequence in Jesus' life is birth, then ascension, then return to earth, then death, and then resurrection. This passage in the Quran is also speaking of the resurrection of Jesus and not his ascension to God without first dying, as claimed by Muslims. Thus, this verse is contrary to the prevailing Muslim view. With these verses, the Quran seems to say things similar to the Bible. But next, look at Surah 4, verses 157 to 158. And they're saying, meaning the Jews saying, surely we have killed the Messiah, Isa son of Maryam, that's Mary's Arabic name, the apostle of Allah. And they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them so, like Isa. And most surely those who differ therein are only in a doubt about it. They have no knowledge respecting it, but only follow a conjecture. And they killed him not for sure. Nay, Allah took him up to himself, and Allah is mighty wise. Here in verse 157, the Quran is saying that the Jews boast that they killed Jesus the Messiah, but denies that they killed him or crucified him. It just appeared to them to be so. The Quran then flatly denies that they killed him, but that Allah took him up to himself. The same two verses are translated in the King Fahd complex for the printing of the Quran in Medina, Saudi Arabia, translation with commentary in this way. And because of this saying, in boast, we killed Messiah, Isa, that is Jesus, son of Maryam or Mary, the messenger of Allah. But they killed him not, nor crucified him. But the resemblance of Isa, that is Jesus, was put over another man, and they killed that man. And those who differ therein are full of doubts. They have no certain knowledge. They follow nothing but conjecture. For surely they killed him not, that is Isa, Jesus, son of Maryam or Mary. But Allah raised him, that is Isa, Jesus, up with his body and soul unto himself, and he is in the heavens, and Allah is ever all-powerful, all-wise. The words in verse 57, but the resemblance of Isa, that is Jesus, was put over another man, and they killed that man, are not a literal translation, but added as a commentary based on the hadiths or sayings of the companions of Muhammad based on what Muhammad said or did. Now, these are not literal translation but added as a commentary in the Hadith narrated by Ibn Abbas, mentioning that Muhammad described the last day of Prophet Isa on earth, that he gathered his pupils in a house and asked them, "Who among you shall be given my appearance to be crucified in my place and be my companion in paradise?" The youngest among them stood up and said, "I." This may be the reason for the Muslim belief that another disciple who looked like him was substituted for Jesus to be crucified to die on the cross. But the Jews thought it was Jesus who was crucified and died. We see here that the Quran does not give us its own detailed version of what actually happened at the crucifixion or death or resurrection of Jesus Christ. It just seeks to discredit the detailed version of events contained in the Bible. But according to the Bible, crucifixion, death, and resurrection are central to God's plan of salvation for mankind. Since these verses in the Quran can be interpreted in different ways, it has led to many theories among the Muslims to try and explain the actual event of the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. These theories include: number one, Jesus didn't actually die, he simply swooned or went into a coma and appeared to be dead but woke up after 3 days and was claimed to have been resurrected. Number two, Jesus did actually die, but his disciples stole the body. This saying was actually reported among the Jews and is mentioned in the Bible, but it contradicts Sura 4, verse 157 in the Quran, which asserts that Jesus did not die. Number three, there was a person who was crucified and died, but it was another person substituted for the real Jesus. Since Jesus did not die, he could be claimed to have been resurrected the third day. This theory, as mentioned earlier, is not in the Quran but based on a hadith, which could be just conjecture on the part of the one to whom the hadith is attributed. Can you imagine Jesus asking another person to die on his behalf according to what else is written about him in the Bible? He said in John 15, verse 13, "Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." That is what Jesus did. It is simply unimaginable that he would ask a close friend to be crucified on his behalf. The fourth theory, Muslims also say that there was no need for another man to die for the sins of other men. That is unfair. So they question the story of the death of Jesus Christ for the sins of mankind. That is why they do not believe Jesus was crucified and died. Number five, the whole resurrection story is a myth to some of them. And number six, some Muslims even go so far as to say that Jesus is a myth. Now, from the biblical account, we can provide these 7 proofs that the man who was crucified by Jesus Christ, and he indeed died. Number 1, reliability of the source. Number 2, crucifixion was an agonizing, excruciatingly painful experience. Number 3, besides being crucified, Jesus Christ was actually killed by a spear to his side. Number 4, death at the hands of Roman torturers and executioners was certain. Number 5, diverse eyewitnesses to the death of Jesus Christ. Number 6, Jesus' disciples and women knew that he was laid in a tomb and where the tomb was, and that the tomb was guarded by Roman soldiers. Number 7, finally, God prophesied the coming and death of Jesus Christ in many Old Testament prophecies. God the Father assured that Jesus Christ died for the sins of mankind, and Jesus Christ knew that was the very reason he came to earth. Now let's look at each of these proofs. Number 1, reliability of the source. In my ebook, Which Holy Book is the Word of God, available free on my religion website, www.churchofgodmessage.com, I have provided proofs that the Bible is the Word of God, whereas Quran is not. Therefore, when we evaluate the reliability of the two sources for the account of events surrounding the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we must accept the account in the Bible and reject the lies in the Quran. Number 2, the crucifixion was an excruciating experience. Now, Jesus Christ's trial, crucifixion, and death were public events. Before he was crucified, He went through a trial by the Jews, then by the Roman governor Pilate, then by King Herod, who happened to be in Jerusalem at that time. He was severely beaten during these trials and finally scourged before being crucified. Before his scourging by Roman soldiers, Jesus Christ had suffered beatings and savage treatment at the hands of the Jews. He was first tried before the Jewish Sanhedrin. After the Jewish high priest pronounced him worthy of death because he admitted that he was the Christ, his treatment at the hands of Jews at the trial is described in Matthew 26, verses 67 to 68. Then they spat on his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palm of their hands, meaning slapped him on his face as hard as they could, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ, who is the one who struck you?" The Sanhedrin then turned over Jesus to the Romans to be tried because he claimed to be the Messiah, hence perceived as a threat to Roman rule. After his trial before Pilate, Jesus Christ was given over to Roman soldiers to be scourged before being crucified. Here is a description of the Roman scourging from the United Church of God booklet titled Jesus Christ, the Real Story. Death at the hands of Roman torturers and executioners was certain and could come from several causes. Journalist Lee Strobel, in an interview with Dr. Alexander Matherell, described the death of Jesus from a medical point of view in his book The Case for Christ, pages 193 to 200. Jesus had been beaten repeatedly and lashed with a Roman scourge before his crucifixion. The leather scourge, a type of whip, was designed to inflict maximum pain and damage on the victim. It was braided with pieces of bone and metal woven into the ends that tore into the flesh with each stroke. The scourge would rip into the underlying muscles and produce strips of quivering, bleeding flesh. Eusebius, a 3rd century historian, reports that the sufferer's veins were laid bare and the very muscles, sinews, and bowels of the victim were open to exposure. Many victims would die from the scourging before they could be crucified. The extreme pain, coupled with loss of blood, would often cause the victim to go into shock. His blood pressure would drop and cause fainting, collapse, and intense thirst. The Gospels record that Jesus experienced those symptoms on his way to Golgotha. Weakened to the point of collapse, he couldn't bear the weight of the beam he was carrying, and a bystander, Simon of Cyrene, was forced to carry it part of the way for him. This is in Mark 15, verse 21. When he was crucified, he said, "I thirst," in John 19, verse 28. God prophesied this type of treatment of the Christ in Isaiah 52, verse 14. His form disfigured, lost all human likeness. His appearance so changed, he no longer looked like a man. What this tells us is that he was so badly beaten, so bloodied and maimed, that he was scarcely recognizable as a human being. After the scourging, Pilate wanted to release Jesus, but his accusers insisted that he be crucified. Pilate then handed Jesus over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. The Roman soldiers then further treated Jesus Christ brutally because he was now a man condemned to die. As described in Matthew 27, verses 27 to 31, the soldiers then pressed a crown of thorns and set it on his head. Then they mocked him and struck him on the head again and again with a staff. Then they led him away to crucify him. Now, because of the scourging, Jesus would have already been in a serious to critical condition even before he was taken away to be crucified. The United Church of God booklet continues. In a crucifixion, the Romans typically used iron nails 5 to 7 inches long and about 3/8 of an inch square, driven into the victim's wrists and feet to fasten him to the wooden members. Nails were driven into the wrists between the arm bones because the hands themselves could not support the weight of the body. The nails pounded through the wrist would have crushed the median nerve, the largest nerve going to the hand, causing indescribable pain. The pain was absolutely unbearable, says Dr. Matherell. In fact, it was literally beyond words to describe. They had to invent a new word, excruciating pain. Literally, excruciating means out of the cross. Nails driven through the feet would have brought similar pain. Because of body weight and stress produced on the body from being hung by his arms, Jesus Christ's arms would have stretched several inches and both his shoulders dislocated. The prophecy of Christ's suffering in Psalm 22 verse 14 refers to this exact condition. I am poured out like water and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, it is melted within me. Dr. Matherell continues with a description of the agonies Jesus endured. Once a person is hanging in a vertical position, crucifixion is essentially an agonizingly slow death by asphyxiation, which means dying due to inability to breathe normally. It is extremely hard for the victim to breathe. Now, because of the stresses on the muscles, bones, and the diaphragm, the pain due to the nails would be unbearable. This would go on until complete exhaustion would take over and the person wouldn't be able to push up and breathe anymore. That is how excruciating a death by crucifixion is. But crucifixion is not what finally killed Jesus Christ on the cross. So the third proof is the cause of Jesus' death. As was common for the victims, many died from the trauma of the crucifixion or eventually suffocated because of inability to breathe normally. Many people assume that is how Jesus died on the cross, but that is not what eventually killed him. As with many other aspects of Jesus' life, God had prophesied many details of his crucifixion and death, including how Jesus would die on the cross. Zechariah the prophet, talking about the people of Jerusalem, wrote in Zechariah 12 verse 10, "They will look on me, the one they have pierced." The Bible speaks of the great importance of Jesus Christ's shed blood. In Acts 20 verse 28, Paul warns the church pastors to shepherd the church of God, which Jesus has purchased with his own blood. Jesus himself said that the wine of the New Testament Passover represented my blood, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Matthew 26 verse 28. Clearly, pouring out of Jesus' blood for the sins of humanity was the central focus of Christ's sacrifice. This is how John describes how Jesus died in John 19 verses 30 to 37. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished," and bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Therefore, because it was the preparation day that the bodies should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, so that they may believe. For these things were done that the scripture should be fulfilled. Not one of his bones shall be broken. And again another scripture says, "They shall look on him whom they pierced." John's description of the event makes it appear that Jesus died on the cross and then later was stabbed by one of the Roman soldiers, bringing a certain flow of blood and water. This is in verse 34. But the problem with this interpretation of events is that once the heart has stopped its pumping action after death, dead bodies no longer bleed like that. So Jesus' blood could not have been poured out. The explanation is provided in the United Church of God booklet, Jesus Christ, the Real Story, pages 38 to 39. This problem is resolved when we consider many other manuscripts of Matthew's Gospel which contain words that appear in a few Bible translations but were left out of most modern versions. These missing words tell us the proper sequence of events. The 20th century New Testament includes these words, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus called out loudly, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of those standing by heard him and said mistakenly, this man is calling for Elijah. One of them immediately ran and took a sponge and, filling it with common wine, put it on the end of a rod and offered it to him to drink. But the rest said, wait and let us see if Elijah is coming to save him. However, another man took a spear and pierced his side, and water and blood flowed from it. But Jesus, uttering another loud cry, gave up his spirit. The words missing in the modern translations are, however, another man took a spear and pierced his side, and water and flood flowed from it. These words show the correct sequence of events. That Jesus was stabbed in the side with a spear, uttered a loud cry, and then died. Other versions that contain the missing words include the Moffat translation and the Rotherham Emphasized Bible, and various other Bible versions include a footnote or marginal reference noting the omitting words. So does Matthew's account conflict with John's? No. Both describe the same events but from different perspectives. Matthew jumps immediately from Jesus' death to a description of the temple veil being torn in half, while John focuses on the fact that, in contrast to the two criminals crucified with Jesus, not one of his bones was broken. John then explains parenthetically how Jesus had already died so that his bones did not need to be broken in fulfillment of the prophecy in Psalm 34:20, and the symbolism of the Passover lambs, because his side had been pierced with a spear in fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah 12 verse 10. Then what was this final fatal thrust like that ended Jesus' life? The United Church of God booklet, Jesus Christ, the Real Story, continues. John Lyle Cameron, MD, explains, the soldier was a Roman. He would be well trained, proficient, and would know his duty. He would know which part of the body to pierce in order that he might obtain a speedy fatal result or ensure that the victim was undeniably dead. The soldier standing below our crucified Lord as he hung on the cross would thrust upwards under the left ribs. The broad, clean-cutting, two-edged spearhead would enter the left side of the upper abdomen, would open the stomach, it would pierce the diaphragm, would cut wide open the heart and the great blood vessels, arteries and veins, and would lacerate the lung. The wound would be large enough to permit the open hand to be thrust into it. Compare John 20 verses 24 to 27. Blood, together with water from the stomach, would flow forth in abundance. The whole event, as described by St. John, must indeed have happened, for no writer could have presented in such a coherent detail so recognizable an event unless he or someone had actually witnessed its occurrence. This is quoted by R.V.G. Tasker, Tyndale New Testament Commentaries, John 2000, published. John was the disciple Jesus loved. He certainly would have known that the man who died on the cross was Jesus Christ and not someone substituted in his place because he witnessed the event. The number fourth proof is the Roman execution. Being crucified meant Jesus was condemned to die by crucifixion. A Roman centurion was put in charge of the crucifixion with Roman soldiers to assist him. Romans were very thorough with their executions because Roman law required the death penalty for a soldier failing to carry out the sentence. The Roman centurion and his soldiers were putting their own lives at risk if they failed to carry out the execution of Jesus Christ. Therefore, they made sure that Jesus was dead. Severity of Roman discipline for failing to carry out the task assigned is illustrated in Acts 18 verses 19, when King Herod had put Peter in prison. At night an angel came and brought Peter out of jail. When search was made and Peter was not found, Herod examined the guards and then commanded that they should be put to death. Herod had the entire guard executed because they had none left. They had let one prisoner escape. Another incident in Acts 16 verses 22 to 28, Paul and Silas were put in prison. While Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns, suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's chains were loosed. Verses 27 to 28 now. And the keeper of the prison, awaking from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, supposing the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about to kill himself. But Paul called out with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." Here we see the reaction of the jailer when he thought the prisoners had escaped. He knew the sentence for him was death if the prisoners had escaped. So he thought he was better off dead in his own hand, by his own hand, rather than be put to death by Roman soldiers. Therefore, one should not doubt that the centurion and the soldiers charged with the execution of Jesus would have made sure that he did not survive the crucifixion. That was made sure in many ways. As Jesus hung on the cross at 3 p.m., the Jewish Holy Day feast, the first day of unleavened bread, was approaching at sunset. The Jewish authorities who were witnessing the crucifixion wanted the three being crucified to die quickly because they and the people wanted to hasten home before sunset to keep the feast. John 19 verses 20 to 23 tells us that the Jews asked that the legs of the three crucified might be broken to hasten their death. So they broke the legs of the two, but did not break Jesus' legs, because they saw that he was already dead, because the soldier had put a spear through him. Roman executioners were experts and knew when a man was dead. They knew Jesus Christ was not breathing. Labored breathing would have been visible on the cross. Some have claimed that the Roman soldiers were actually trying to save Jesus' life by not breaking his legs. But why would the Roman centurion and the soldiers with him try to do that? Because they knew that in doing so they would be signing their own death warrants. Moreover, Jesus was perceived as a threat to the Roman Empire, as they feared that he would lead an insurrection against Roman rule as others had done in the past. So all the Roman soldiers charged with executing him wanted him dead, and they made sure of that. The Roman soldier who perceived a side with a spear was also making doubly sure of that. After Jesus was dead, Joseph of Arimathea went to Pilate and begged him to give Jesus Christ's body to him. Mark 15 verses 42 to 45 say that Pilate marveled that he was already dead. He then summoned the centurion who witnessed the execution and asked him if Jesus had been dead for some months. When the centurion confirmed it, he granted the body to Jesus. He granted the body to Joseph of Arimathea, who was a very rich and prominent member of the Sanhedrin, certainly knew who Jesus was, that he was dead, and knew that he had laid the dead body of Jesus in his own tomb. The fifth proof is eyewitnesses to Jesus' death. The next proof that Jesus died on the cross is that there were numerous eyewitnesses of his death from all walks of life. These eyewitnesses included Romans, top row Jewish leaders, most common Jewish folk who walked by throughout the day time he was on the cross. Many women who were his relatives and among those who administered to him during his 3.5 year ministry, Jesus' own mother, and even John the Apostle, one of his 12 disciples. Matthew 27 verse 54 and Mark 15 verse 39 and Luke 23 verses 36 to 39 and John chapter 19 verses 22 to 23 describe how the centurion and soldiers witnessed Jesus' death. John described how the 4 soldiers divided his garments and cast lots for his tunic. Matthew 27 verses 41 to 43 tells us that eyewitnesses to Jesus' crucifixion and death included Jewish leaders, even the chief priests, scribes, and elders, which would have included members of the Sanhedrin, the highest Jewish court of justice. They wanted Jesus dead and watched him die on the cross. Now, besides the Jewish leaders, Luke 23 verse 27 tells us a great many of the common folk followed Jesus and witnessed the crucifixion and death. In addition to the multitude, Luke 23 verse 49 states, and all his acquaintance and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. This means that many of Jesus' acquaintances and relatives witnessed these events. They certainly would have known that it was Jesus who was crucified and died on the cross. The number of the people who witnessed the crucifixion may have numbered in the thousands and hundreds, and could have stayed night till the very end Jesus died. Remember, this was the time of the feast of the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread. Huge crowds would have been gathered in Jerusalem from all over the land and even from other nations for the feast. They knew Jesus because of the many miracles he had done throughout the land. That is why the number of witnesses to the crucifixion would have numbered in the thousands. Many of Jesus' acquaintances, family, and close relatives, including his own mother and aunt, witnessed the crucifixion till his death. John 19 verses 25 to 27 and Mark 15 verses 40 to 41 and the other Gospels mention this fact. Many women had come to Jerusalem from Galilee to keep the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread with Jesus. They all witnessed his crucifixion and certainly stayed till his death. Matthew 27, 59 to 60 and Luke 23, 55 were slow that Jesus' mother, her sister, his aunt, and other women saw his crucifixion and stayed till he died on the cross. At least 2 of these women followed when Jesus of Arimathea took his body and laid it in his own tomb so that they could come later to anoint it with spices. All these relatives and friends would have been certain that it was Jesus who died on the cross, not a substitute. All these people would have had to conspire to lie if another man had been substituted for Jesus on the cross. That is so far-fetched. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, both members of the Sanhedrin, brought spices, with Nicodemus alone bringing 100 pounds, handled Jesus' dead body for more than an hour to bury it in linen clothes and with spices. They certainly knew it was Jesus' body they were handling and that he was dead. Finally, John, one of the 12 disciples, also observed Jesus' crucifixion and death till the end, as described in John 19 verses 25 to 27. Jesus even gave him a charge to take care of his mother after he died. So with so many eyewitnesses from all walks of life to the crucifixion and death of Jesus on the cross, we can be certain that he indeed died and was laid in the tomb. Sixth proof was that Jesus was laid in a tomb. Sura 4 verses 157 to 158 in the Quran says, "They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them so they killed him not for sure." 158. Nay, Allah took him up to himself. This means that if Allah took Jesus to himself, his body was no longer on the cross. If his body was no longer to be found, then it could not have been laid in a tomb. One does not put a live person in a tomb, but a dead one. Now, can you imagine the sensation it would have caused if a live man hanging on a cross or beam suddenly vanishes into thin air? But there is no mention of any such thing happening in the Bible. For 580 years, all the world accepted the events as described in the Bible, till the illiterate Muhammad came along with his account contradicting them. But the account surrounding the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that Muhammad brought to the world is totally inconsistent with reality. To try and justify the lie he brought, he had to justify another lie, that the account in the Bible was altered. But we have provided a mountain of evidence to show that the entire Bible has been very carefully preserved, and the version we have in the original languages is indeed the inspired word of God. We have already mentioned that Joseph of Arimathea laid Jesus in his own tomb with his own hands, assisted by Nicodemus. People in Jerusalem would have known where Joseph's tomb was because he was a famous rich man. The disciples certainly knew about it because Peter and John visited the tomb after 3 days and 3 nights. The Jewish leaders, the chief priests, and the Pharisees also knew where the tomb was in which Jesus had been laid. They knew of the sign Jesus gave that he would be the Messiah, which was that he would lie in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights and then be resurrected. They wanted to make sure that no hoax was perpetrated by his disciples to make that claim. Matthew describes in chapter 27 verses 60 to 66 how they with Pilate's permission put a guard to make the tomb secure and put a seal on the stone at the entrance of the tomb. We see there many witnesses to the fact that Jesus had died and had been laid in a tomb. Only dead men are laid in tombs. Thus, Surah 4 157 in the Quran is a blatant lie of the arch deceiver Satan the devil, told to Muhammad by a demon masquerading around as the Archangel Gabriel, finally transmitted by me to his followers. Number 7 proof is God foretold Jesus' death in many prophecies. The seventh and final proof that Jesus did indeed die on the cross is that God the Father made sure that Jesus died on the cross. God the Father and Jesus Christ foretold his death in many Old Testament prophecies. If Jesus did not die, then all these prophecies have been unfulfilled. Literally, a proof of God's truthfulness and his almighty power is at stake. But as God and Jesus Christ fulfilled all the prophecies about ancient empires and nations, they certainly would have made sure to fulfill their prophecies about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Let's look at specific Old Testament prophecies that foretold the death of the Messiah, which Jesus fulfilled. Now, Peter told the crowd of Jews at Acts 3 verse 18, "But those things which remain God foretold by the mouth of all his prophets, and that the Christ would suffer he has thus fulfilled. The United Church of God booklet Jesus Christ the Real Story states on page 16, many Old Testament prophecies of the Messiah were fulfilled in precise detail by Jesus of Nazareth. Then on page 18, the New Testament writers cite messianic prophecies from the Old Testament more than 130 years ago. By some estimates, the Old Testament contains 300 prophetic passages that describe who the Messiah is and what he will do. Of these, 60 are major prophecies. Now, what are the chances of these prophecies being fulfilled in one person? First, the mathematical odds that all of these prophecies could be converged by chance in the events of the life of Jesus are staggeringly minute to the point of eliminating any such possibility. Astronomer and mathematician Peter Stoner, in his book Science Speaks, offers a mathematical analysis showing that it is impossible that the precise statements about the one to come could be fulfilled in a single room by mere coincidence. The chance of only 8 of these dozens of prophecies being fulfilled in the life of one man has been estimated at 1 into 10 to the 10th power. That would be, I believe, 1 in 100 million. How can we put insurance in terms we can understand? Dr. Stoner illustrates the odds and ends with this scenario. Take 10 silver dollars and lay them on the face of Texas with its approximate land area of 262,000 square miles. They will cover all of the state 2 feet deep. Now mark one of these silver dollars and stir the whole mass thoroughly all over the slate. Blindfolded man, and tell him that he can travel as far as he wishes, but he must pick up one silver dollar and say that this is the right one. So what happens would you have of splitting the right one, of getting the right one? Just shame enhance that the prophets would have had a writing on these 8 prophecies and having them all come true in one man. But that is only 8 of the dozen prophecies of the Messiah. Using the science of probability, the chance of as many as 48 of these byproducts coming to pass in one person is 1 in 10 to the 157th power, as I followed by 157 zeros, 163, pages 100 to 109. Virtually every aspect of Jesus' suffering and death were spelled out, if considerable details, centuries before it actually happened. So here are the descriptions that prophesied Jesus' crucifixion and death. First, fear of all. Let's look at the chapter 10, verse 4. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. Then verse 12 says, but this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins, sat down at the right hand of God. Only the shed blood of the Creator could have paid the penalty for the sins of mankind. Thus the lamb sacrifice of the Passover were a prophecy of the coming of the sacrifice of the coming Messiah. Jesus fulfilled many prophecies in the last 24 hours before he collapsed. These include Messiah would be betrayed by a friend. Psalm 41 verse 9. Even my own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me. Prophecy fulfilled by Judas Iscariot in John 13. Messiah would be taken by his followers. Zechariah 13 verse 7 says, "Strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered," fulfilled when all his disciples forsook him and fled when he was arrested. Number 3. The price of his betrayal would be 30 pieces of silver. Zechariah 11 verses 12 to 13 states, "So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, Throw it to the potter, that princely price they set on me," fulfilled when Judas Iscariot covenanted for 13 days of silver with the chief guests to betray Jesus. Number 4. The Messiah would be put to death with criminals. Isaiah 53 verse 12 states, "And he was numbered with the transgressors," fulfilled when two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and another on the left. Now Messiah would be crucified. Psalm 22 verse 16 states, "They pierced my hands and my feet." Remarkably, this prophecy describes the form of execution, the crucifixion, which would not have come into practice for some 800 years after it was written. Then next prophecy, Messiah's body would be pierced. Zechariah 12 verse 10 states, "They will look on me whom they pierced," fulfilled in John 19 verse 34. One of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately water and blood came out. The Messiah would be offered vinegar and gall. This was prophesied in Psalm 69 verse 21. "They also gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink." This was fulfilled when Jesus was no longer would offer any protection against vinegar with gall to break, as stated by Matthew 27 verse 34. They gave him vinegar to drink mingled with oil. Then none of his bones would be broken was prophesied in Psalm 34 verse 30. He guards all his bones, and not one of them is broken. When the Jews came to break the legs of the three crucified men, they did not break Jesus' legs because he had already died on the cross when the Roman soldier pierced his side with a spear, as described in John 19 verse 32 to 34. Then people would divide his garments and cast lots for his clothing. This was prophesied in Psalm 22 verse 18. "They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." John confirms in John 19:23 to 24 that this prophecy was fulfilled. Then Messiah would not retaliate was prophesied in Isaiah 53 verse 7. "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." Its fulfillment is described in Matthew 27 verses 12 to 14. "And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said to him, 'Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?' But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly." Then Messiah would pray for those who would have him put to death in Isaiah 53 verse 12. "He made intercession for the transgressors." It was fulfilled when Jesus prayed on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." Thus we see that the God of the Bible prophesied in detail the manner of the death of the Messiah, and all the prophecies were fulfilled in precise detail in the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ. Probabilistically, it is impossible for a particular one man to fulfill all the prophecies by mere coincidence. Therefore, we can be certain that Jesus was the prophesied Messiah and he died as God foretold. God of the Bible is also a truthful God. Paul the Apostle tells us in 1 Titus 1 verse 2 that God cannot lie. In contrast to the God of the Bible, compare the Allah of Islam. In Sura 4 verses 157 to 158, Allen said, "They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them so they killed him not for sure. Then, nay, Allah took him up to himself." Yusuf Ali's translation renders the words, "but it appeared to them as so it was made to appear to them." This is also how Muslims interpret this passage. They say that Allah made it appear to the Jews and others who witnessed the event that Jesus was crucified and died on the cross. But he was not actually crucified and did not die because Allah made him ascend to himself. Why would Allah feel the need to deceive the Jews into seeing Jesus crucified and dying on the cross, but make him ascend to himself? Why would Allah need to deceive anybody? The Quran in this verse thus states that Allah is a deceiver. That actually is the truth. In contrast to the God of the Bible who cannot lie, the Allah of Islam actually states in Surah 4 verses 157 to 158 that he deceived the Jews into believing that Jesus was crucified and died on the cross when he actually made him ascend to himself. Thus, Allah of Islam stands exposed as a deceiver, engaged in deceiving the Muslim followers and his lies in the Quran. It is tragic that Muslims are willing to accept one more statement from the Queen of England in Surah 4 verses 57 to 58. That Jesus was not crucified and did not die on the cross. They need to critically examine the evidence for the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ and reject the lies in the Quran. As it told to Muhammad by a lying companion in the Hadiths. They need to critically examine the evidence for the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ and reject the lies in the Quran as told to Muhammad by a lying demon masquerading as the Archangel Gabriel. The Allah of Islam is a fiction. No such being exists. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channel and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view or get information on the latest videos.